Hey guys, it's Shadow. In this video we're going to be focusing on some of the most common mistakes I've seen being made around 1500 ELO. I went through over 60 of my games around this ELO to work out the recurring mistakes I was making and seen many other players make too. The first mistake I want to highlight in this video is very greedy deer pushing. I've seen many players pushing deers until late Dark Age with absolutely no clue what their opponent is doing, causing them to be taken off guard by a strategy they go for, or being unable to find their opponent's space in a reasonable time for their own rush. In this particular instance, my opponent was opening scouts and hadn't even left a scout where I was on my strategy until after 9 minutes and 30 seconds of in-game time. As a result of this, his opening was ineffective, especially upon me adding a spear shortly afterwards, and I was able to pick off 2 villages with relative ease. This partially helped snowball the game in my favour. Scouting is extremely important in AoE2DE, which leads me to my next area of critique. Throwing army in general and losing military to the TC is a huge problem at this ELO, especially losing the starting scout. This is just a compilation of a few of the many times I saw at least one player lose a starting scout out of just over the 60 games. Lacking this scouting information means that your opponent can take advantage of this and surprise you with a different opening to what you may expect, and causes your opening to be less powerful. To help avoid losing your starting scout, ensure that you are constantly checking between your economy and scout. If you need to look away for some reason, place that scout in an area you know is likely safe, i.e. somewhere you've already scouted and know your opponent cannot wall your scout in. And it's not just about losing the starting scout, of course. Many a militia, men-at-arms, scout and archer have found themselves with a face full of arrows in this ELO. Early melee army should ideally be on defensive or stand ground stance to make it so they're less likely to run into the TC, and ensuring that you're keeping an eye on your army in the event that you are single targeting an enemy unit also helps with this. Ranged units should generally be on stand ground most of the time. Of course, it is not only TCs in which you can throw your army away. Not checking with your army regularly enough in general can cause you to lose scouts to spears, archers to skirmishers, which could have been kept alive and gained more value. If you know that you need to look away from your army for an extended period of time, i.e. to sort your economy out, it is better to bring your army home at this point, rather than risk losing it. The third major mistake I have seen on the regular is housing. Housing is a problem at all ELOs, however, if we're able to work out the times in which we often get housed, it allows us to realise this may be more habitual than we realised, and adjust accordingly. The worst of the housing I've noticed tends to happen between 25 and 45 population during feudal age. The earlier housing occurs, the worse it is for the most part. The reason behind this is twofold. Getting housed earlier causes you to fall behind on villain numbers and also slows your rush down considerably. This housing seems to pick up again towards late castle age, around 75 to 90 population. Something I always recommend to people is if you have at least 3 buildings producing units constantly, you also need at least 1 villager constantly making houses. The fourth major mistake I see in many games at this ELO is not saving farms proactively. Floating even seemingly small amounts of wood, i.e. 200 to 300 during early feudal age, will really hurt your castle age uptimes, due to food being a much slower resource to collect than wood. And the bottleneck to cleaning up to castle age most of the time is food. During castle age, wood floating hurts a lot more than food or gold floating still. Again, this is due to wood having a significantly higher collection rate than other resources. Unless you are floating wood for a specific purpose, i.e. university ballistics, siege workshop or monastery, you will cause your economy and imperial age uptime to suffer if you continue to float wood. The fifth mistake I see regularly is not reacting to scouted information quickly enough. For example, if you scout a barracks early, you know there is likely to be a drush or men-at-arm rush coming your way depending on the time you scout it. And in the likely event you do not have full walls up at this time, you will need to wall in your individual resources. Doing this ahead of time is far better than quick walling at the last minute, as this leaves you more prone to mistakes. Another example is seeing a massive ranged unit and not taking an appropriate counter to them. In feudal age this is generally skirmishers, and in castle age this is normally skirmishers or siege. In this example, my opponent scouts that I have a decent mass of CA. Instead of dropping a range or two or a siege workshop, my opponent makes additional farms, and this delays getting these units on the field needed to counter my mass. This ties into my next point, people being stubborn to attack a counter unit when necessary. Not going to lie, this is something I am known to do a bit too much, especially when I'm using knights. In this situation, I take a good fight with my knights against a mixture of pikes and eagle warriors due to the sheer number I've massed, and after this point I go forward. I'm very late, however, to take a decent counter to the pikes, and the few scorpions I make 2 minutes later just are not enough to clean this up without taking heavy losses. I need archers, skirms, longswords or genitors as I'm berbers. By staying on knights for as long as I did with no complementary unit, I caused this game to be extended and had the possibility of throwing my advantage position. The 7th mistake I'd like to focus on is not scouting additional areas to attack, in particular when doing feudal rushes or castle age all-ins. During feudal age, people often find themselves up against a wall and just attack it instead of scouting for possible holes or a patch of wall that is not yet completed. One fix to this is to click inside your opponent's space when you think they may be fully walled. During Castle Age and Imperial Age, it is likely your opponent is walled and possibly has multiple town centres or even castles, making it even more difficult to pressure them. If you're not able to find damage in one area, it is important to scout for other areas which may have more exposed economy, i.e. an extra stone or gold, other woodlines outside of the main base, or even a different part of the main base which is harder for them to defend, for example near a hill. Getting tunnel vision can cause your push to fail and give the opponent a significant lead. This is part 1 of an at least 2-part series, so stay tuned for part 2. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.